Black Tech Green Money, Will Lucas here. So good to be back with you guys. I have an exciting episode, one I'm very much looking forward to because I get to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that is brand, positioning, and all those things, and intermingled with technology. As you guys know, that's one of the things that we're talking about most these days is how to position yourself in this new world, create opportunities for yourself, and more. And with that, there's not many people you can talk to better than the guest I have today, my Elious, who's a CEO and brand strategist at Built to Impact. She helps entrepreneurs just like you listening on your way to work, elevate your message, upgrade your offers, refine your business model so you can finally run a business from a place of alignment, integrity, and depth. Welcome, Maya.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. It's good to have you. And so I want to kick this off. You often say, you're trying to help entrepreneurs stop shrinking into outdated brands and ways of positioning themselves. What were some of the personal signs for you that it was time to reinvent your own brand? And how did you make peace with that, to be able to also help other people do the same?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I've recognized that I've outgrown my brand when I don't feel excited about the things that I'm selling anymore, or I don't feel like I'm making impact. So anytime before I make a pivot, I'm looking at three different areas. I look at, am I making money? Am I making an impact? And am I creating joy within myself? And all three of those things matter because obviously as a business, I have to be making money. And I think money can sometimes be a taboo topic, but your business cannot run without money. That is the fuel source, for your business. So it has to be making money. And more importantly, it has to be profitable. It has to be making enough money that it can actually continue running. And then the second thing, if you're somebody who's purpose driven like I am, it has to be impactful. It actually has to be making a difference in somebody's, life, business, revenue, finances, relationship, whatever your niche is going to be. But for me, I want to know that the work that I'm doing and the money that I'm making is a result of making somebody else's life better. And then lastly, it has to be something that's enjoyable for me. It's something that brings me fulfillment. It's something that adds to my, existing joy, my existing peace, my existing fulfillment. So those are the three things that I look at. When I get to a place where I'm not as profitable, I'm not impacting as many people, I don't feel the same level of fulfillment that I might have felt in previous seasons. That's when I start to take a look at, is this a season that I need to pivot? Am I only staying in this season or selling these products and services because that's what used to work for me in the past, because I feel loyal to, the clients and customers that served me back in 2019? Or is it now time for me to really evolve?
Yeah, so I have a question there. So let's put the profitability to the side because I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and one of those two things, making money or impact, they can often have confusing effects on entrepreneurs. And here's what I mean: they could be making money, but not love the work that they're doing, not feel like they're making an impact, and that's one challenge. And some are making an impact and love the work they're doing, but they ain't making no money. So what happens when you when you have these conversations with, hey, I'm making money, but I ain't really making, I don't find joy anymore. How do you have those tough conversations? Because I'm making money, or I
Right.
really love the work.
Right, yeah. Honestly, it's hard to hear, especially for people who really have, that good heart, that gracious heart. I work with a lot of believers, a lot of women of faith, and the number one
Yeah.
thing is I really just want to serve people. The money is
Yeah.
honestly the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the more money you have, the more options you have to actually then now do the things that you enjoy doing. So if you are making good money, but you no longer feel fulfillment, my thought process is you keep running that product or service, but then you just delegate it, or you figure out, is
That's
this
good.
maybe a business that I want to sell or whatever. You don't just let the money go and you throw it away and then you go on to something that's not as profitable, but it's so joyful and fulfilling. So I'm not saying to trade your peace for money. It's not something that should be causing you to be, burnt out or sick or anything like that. But if it's making you good money, consider other ways um, that you can make that pivot. Can I now delegate this to a team and then I start implementing another offer? That's enjoyable to me. So that's where I would start if people are making good money. but they're no longer fulfilled. Then there's the group of people who are like, well, I'm not making that much money, but I just love what I do. And I'm like, it's only so long you're going to be able to do this, because we live in a capitalistic society. You're going to have to fund the thing that you enjoy doing. So your fun requires some funding, and you better figure out a way to be able to monetize that.
Yeah. So what happens when evolution is thrust upon you? It's not necessarily I'm choosing to do something different, or I feel a desire to do something different, but when the market is saying you need to do something different. Like I was having this conversation earlier today, actually, with a friend who was providing a service, and I'm like, they wanted to scale, they wanted to grow, they didn't want to own a job, they wanted to own a business. And I'm like, part of the conversation was finding your unique value proposition. What do you uniquely bring to the marketplace that you can leverage? And what happens when what you were once unique at, you are no longer unique at? And the market is saying you've got to evolve.
Right. Then you've got to evolve, because you really don't want to be the Blockbuster, right? Where it's like, okay, Blockbuster was the prominent thing in the 90s. It's like, okay, Friday night, we're going to the movies, we're renting a movie, a video game, whatever it is. If the market is evolving, if we're now going to streaming, you don't just get to say, I once was the best in this. Your goal has to be wanting to be one of the best in your industry, and being the best requires evolution. Like, even if we look at Amazon, Amazon started out selling books. Imagine if Amazon was only still selling books, they would have, been obsolete, or just nowhere near where they are right now. So I think if your primary goal is to remain relevant and to continue impacting people, continue serving people at the level in which evolution is requiring, like, people and consumers are requiring a different level of entertainment. They're requiring a different level of being served. And so you have to figure out a way to meet that evolution. You just got to figure it out. I think that's the answer when it comes to entrepreneurship. You got to figure it out, or else you're going to stay stuck with excuses.
I love the conversation around alignment in meaning. And there are people who are high performers, they are high achievers, and they have a desire to grow, but there's also a desire to potentially do something else, because either the market is telling them to do something, or they're internally saying, yeah, I'm growing, but I'm growing in the wrong vertical. They're potentially likely in that switch, they're gonna confuse their audience. They're gonna potentially lose a little bit of revenue in the interim, potentially. How do you balance those types of things when you're trying to get people to see you differently, and you're trying to offer something differently, but now you're switching up the conversation we was having?
Right. This is really where personal branding comes into play, because I do think there is that hesitation and that fear of, if I pivot, if I do something different, I'm going to lose my audience and I'm going to lose revenue. And every single time that I've made a pivot, I always had this fear and the acceptance that, okay, I'm going to lose some people and I'm not going to make as much money. But I have found that for the majority of the time, at least 80% of the time I've made a pivot, I made just as much or even more money, because of the personal brand that I've built. And so when you're building a personal brand, people aren't tied to the product, they're tied to the person. And it doesn't mean that everybody in my audience is going to need what I have next, but they're still supporting me, whether they're referring me. And so as you're making these pivots, part of building your personal brand is knowing how to invite people on your journey and knowing how to tell stories. People are tied to your overall mission. So if you explain to people like, hey, I did this in one season, I'm feeling led, I'm feeling called to move into a different season, I'd appreciate your support, I'm excited that you guys are on this journey with me. I think at the end of the day, a lot of people want to feel like they're part of something bigger. So when people get to be part of your journey and they see that you are elevating, they want to say, oh, I was part of that evolution. Like I have clients that are like, I knew Maya back when she was creating graphics. I knew Maya back when her business was this name. I've been following Maya since the Periscope days. And so people like to be part of that evolution. So the pivot and the transition is so much more seamless when you are building a brand and you're not just building something that's solely based on a product.
Talk about the shifts happening in the marketplace. There was a time when digital products. You gotta be selling something digital, and then it was like you gotta be coaching people. You gotta start a class, and then now you gotta do a mastermind. And like, so talk to me about the shifts you've recognized and what works for who.
Yeah. I mean, I've done it all. I've sold pretty much anything that can make money on the internet. I feel like I've sold it, the master classes, the paid workshops, the masterminds, the group coaching, the one-on-one coaching, all of the things. And I think they're all still relevant. But one of the biggest shifts that I see happening right now is, back in 2012, that's when I started blogging. And I think blogging was something that was still fairly new. I think showing up online and being vulnerable was something that was still seen as brave. And there was, just a lot less noise out there than there is today. And so, whereas in 2012, 2015, 2018, 2019, showing up and giving value was like, oh my gosh, I love following this coach, or I love her courses, or I love her coaching, was something that was a big deal. Now in 2025, it's a standard to actually be valuable. And so it's no longer it's no longer a selling point to say like, oh, I give free game. It's like, well, you should, because everybody else is giving free game. Now what I find is happening with consumers online is that they want education and value, but they also want to be entertained. We are now really using social media as escapism. We're going on there and we want to be inspired. We want to laugh. We're trying to escape just our real lives. And so when we log on, we don't need more reminders of why we're not good at what we do. We don't need more reminders of how far away we are from the mark of the life that we want to live. And so you'll see a little bit of that on the education side, but we simply, ironically, we're looking for connection, even though I do find that, being in the digital space can make us more disconnected. But they're looking to be entertained. They want to escape the reality of what they're dealing with, and they want to feel connected to the people that they're talking to. So just simply being an expert isn't enough anymore. You have to know how to be an expert that knows how to captivate an audience and build trust through storytelling and entertainment.
What mindset blocks or narratives around wealth keep entrepreneurs from stepping into the next level?
I think there are a couple things. I'll say from the perspective of the clients that I work with, again, a lot of believers, a lot of women of faith. And I think that some of the things that hold us back is this fear of being greedy, this fear of seeming like, oh, I'm only doing it for money. And sometimes I have to remind entrepreneurs, like, starting a business for money is also noble. Knowing how to put food on the table is a noble thing. Like, you don't need to have this deep, purposeful, meaningful thing to start a business. I personally like to run businesses where I feel a sense of purpose in the work that I'm doing, but it's also purposeful to be able to pay your bills. And so I think we overthink, the wealth building journey and money, and, am I allowed to love money? Does God want me to have money? Am I gonna whatever? And I'm like, the more you have, the more you have to give. Like, the amount of generosity that I'm able to have is because of the amount of money that I can have. And I think it's also important to know that money makes you more of who you already are. I think people think that money is going to change them. It elevates who you already are. So as a generous person, when I make more money, I give more money. As somebody who likes to go on vacations, when I make more money, I go on more vacations. As somebody who likes to spend time with her family, when I have more money, I have more freedom to spend time with my family. And so I think it's very important to understand what your values are, and then understand, as I build my wealth, the more I get to live my values. The less money you have, the more likely that money is your God, because you're making decisions based on your lack versus based on the options that you have to actually honor your values. And so I think that is really important when it comes to wealth. So I would say that's the first thing when it comes to wealth. The second thing is, I think we assume that wealth, depending on who we're following, can only come from one place. Like, I got to invest in stocks, or I got to invest in real estate, or I got to do day trading, or I got to do whatever. And wealth is really simply about one, becoming as profitable as possible, and then taking your profits and figuring out different investment routes. If you want to do real estate, cool. If you want to do stocks, cool. You want to do day trading, cool. You want to purchase other companies and own them, cool. But you have to first become profitable and then figure out, how do I want to reinvest my profits into things that are going to make me money.
All right. So that was part A of this podcast, because I've been setting up every question for this next question, because I needed to set a foundation. Because I want you to talk about opportunity. And there's a quote I found from you that I'm like, okay, I need her to talk more about this. Where you said, if one person pays me for something, then I can get more people to pay me for it. And so just say more about that. Just say more about that.
I started having that thought process and mindset early on in business. And I don't know, for anybody watching, if you feel like when you were younger, you just had so much more boldness and so much more courage. And even when I first started out, creating MySpace pages, creating club flyers and graphics for people, I'm like, wow, somebody's going to pay me for this. There has to be more people who are going to pay me for this. And, when clients ask about what's my pricing strategy, I jokingly say, like, I'm going to keep selling if people keep buying, and I'm going to keep increasing my prices if people keep buying. And so if one person is going to buy a website, why wouldn't there be more people? If one person sees enough value in what I'm putting out that they will hire me for coaching, why wouldn't more people? And so I'm a signs person. My friend laughs at me because he's always like, you say everything is a sign, and I'm like, well, everything is a sign for me. So if I put $1 on the ground, it's more dollars out there. If I
That's fine.
This week, there's more clients out there. So
Yeah.
I just have an abundant mindset and a belief that if there's one, then there's more, if that's what I desire.
I love that. Because, I was having this conversation earlier, the same conversation I was having earlier, and they were talking about trying to figure out what their product was, like, what is the thing to sell? And the way I think about this is, like, what is the question people most frequently ask you? That's probably something they're telling you your brand can solve this thing for them. Can you elaborate more on, for people who, they're feeling the need to evolve, or maybe it's not even evolution, but they're trying to find the thing in the marketplace. How else would you assist them in finding where they can, provide value to the marketplace?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I do think people need to get better at just assessing opportunities. The first question that I ask my questions is, what do you believe you're the absolute best at? Because if you can figure out what that thing is, you show up with a higher level of confidence, and then you're also not going to downplay yourself and then undercharge. Because that's the big thing that I work on with my clients. Why are you undercharging if you've been in this industry for 8 years, 12 years, 15 years? So really the first thing is, what do you think that you do better than 95% of the rest of the world? For me, that's going to be messaging and positioning. I know how to see an expert and then refine their story and find the right words to position them as the best in their industry. So I think first, figuring out, what are you the best at? What skill sets do you have? What information do you have? What knowledge do you have that you're like, I know this like the back of my hand? If you're trying to figure it out, one way to figure it out is, as you're scrolling on social media and you see other people in your industry kind of talking about the same things, and you're like, she didn't even say that right, or this is so basic, I could have said that better, or I can't believe people are paying her for this. If that little hater inside of you is really just you projecting, because you should have been the one using your voice. You should have been the one teaching this information, because you know that you could actually do it better. So that's an indication that that's an industry that you know really well. Then the second thing is really understanding, what are people seeking? What problems do people have, and what solutions are they seeking that I am qualified to provide? So I know if there's a group of women who, they are experts, maybe they've been in corporate or at their 9 to 5 for a while, and they're like, I want to get into consulting, I want to start coaching, I want to get on the education side, but I don't know how to get clients. I don't believe anybody's going to pay me. I know for sure I could have a 60-minute conversation with them and completely, one, transform their mindset into why they need to charge more, and give them a breakdown on how they could, launch their own coaching program. So you have to understand, what am I the best at, and who has a problem that is actively seeking a solution that I have the skill sets to provide for.
So how do you set up once? Okay, I know I want to do, something, they want to be a podcaster. They went from a corporate executive and you say, I need to use my voice more. I'm going to go start a podcast. I was in corporate and now I need to talk about corporate life. What's the first steps to make when they are doing something completely new, but they have been prepared for it? And like you just said, like, hey, you've been doing this for 8 years. Why are you undercharging? You've been doing this for 8 years. You got something to say. Or potentially you got something to say. What's the first steps to making efforts towards that reinvent itself?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I might be taking this question literally, but when people say like, "Oh, I want to be a podcaster, I want to be a content creator," I look at it like being a podcaster is not a real thing. Podcasting is a form of marketing. Creating content is a form of marketing. Being an influencer, it's a form of marketing. It's influence marketing. So my first thing is when people are like, "Oh, I want to be a content creator," what I hear people saying is like, I want to get paid to be myself." And then it's like, okay, I fully believe you can get paid to be yourself, right? I've done it. I've seen clients do it. We see it every single day. But we have to also consider, what is it uniquely about myself that is going to build a community or build an audience? My assumption is if you want to be a podcaster, that you want brands to pay you. Maybe you want some sponsorships. To do that, to work with brands and get sponsorships, you have to study the market. You have to do market research, which is, I think, a step that a lot of people want to skip. They want to get a mic. They want to get a camera. Y'all are researching lighting, mics, all. Baby, you can make a podcast going like this if you can build an audience, but you have to build the audience and you have to get intimate with your audience, ask them questions, understand, what some of their desires are. And then that is what you sell to the brands that you're working with. You got to go to a brand and say, I have 50,000 listeners. 76% of them are stay-at-home moms that are interested in buying XYZ. This is what they spend money on. You got to know that. Now, if you want to be a podcaster or whatever it is that you're wanting to start, and your primary thing is not to work with brands, you have to know, what am I even selling? Regardless, if you want to work with brands or directly with consumers, you have to know, what am I selling and how does it add value to the person that I want to sell to? So selling with brands are buying access to people. So if you ain't got people, you're not getting money from brands. They're buying access to you being a good storyteller. You can't tell good stories, they're not buying from you. Consumers are buying an outcome. They're buying results. So if you don't have a physical product, a digital product, a service that can get them an outcome, you're not going to generate sales. So you first have to figure out, how can I add value to the person that I want to sell to?
There's another quote I found from you where you said, people were investing in pretty design, but didn't know how to communicate the value of their business. And it made me think about how we've all seen it, people who their business looks beautiful, but I don't know what value they provide. There's no like compelling case for me to get engaged. Can you talk about some of the most common things we do that over-index on how pretty something is versus how effective it is?
Yeah. We definitely over-index what our website looks like, the fonts, the colors, the photo shoots. We over-index what does our Instagram feed look like. What do I look like to the rest of the world? I think the visuals are important, but the visuals are complementary to the foundation of your message. And so when you make the visuals the foundation, you completely miss the point, because the visuals are supposed to support the overall message, the mission, the purpose of your business. So love the visuals. I just think we can't overthink having a beautiful website. We can't think over having beautiful pictures if there's not a message that goes with it. And I do find that people, they'll invest thousands of dollars in a website and be like, I spent all this money on a web designer and my business didn't grow. And I'm like, well, how did you think your business was going to grow? And we believe this lie that if we build it, they will come. No, they won't. You got to build it and then you got to market it. Yeah. And then maybe they will come if you did a good job with marketing.
So what we talk about visuals, and the challenge though, like these days, because of Snapchat and TikTok, like people just opening their phone, they just going live, they just talking to the camera. And I remember a friend of mine, Nikki, this girl, she goes by, this is Nikki Saunders, saying, you know, these days you have to treat social like FaceTime, and you just talking, you just having a conversation. And when Instagram first came out, it was like, how pretty can you make this picture? The filters mattered and all these things. But when Snapchat came, it was like, it was just real life, and we just talking to the thing. And to the question of like visuals, how important the visuals and how beautiful something is, there's a balance there between what worked and what works now. And I don't know if there's a question there, but I just want you to talk about that.
Yeah, I think, back then when we had all of the filters, because even with Snapchat, it was kind of like you get to be more real, but we were on there with filters, okay? We had that dog,
Yeah,
dog, like we wanted our nose to be skinny, skin was smooth. So there was still definitely something to the visuals, and still there is something to visuals, but we want to feel like people are authentically pretty, not they forced themselves into being beautiful, right?
Yeah.
So just as humans, as people, we like to look at things that are aesthetically pleasing, but we also don't like to feel like we're being marketed to, or like the thing that we're looking at is fake. So you have to be able to, find that balance. But yeah, I mean, to Nikki's point, sometimes just going on and just acting like you're on a FaceTime call, I think as the markets have become more saturated, consumers are becoming more discerning into what's real and to what's fake. And so we are leaning more towards what's real, which is typically going to be the things that are not overly produced. And so if you look at pages that have like the perfect templates and the perfect fonts and the colors, and it looks markety, versus the pages that are like, oh, I'm throwing up this quote because it's relatable and it's on black and white text, it's like the black and white text is going to get shared more because they're relating to it based off the relatability, not because it's being marketed to them. And I do think consumers are getting a little bit exhausted of being marketed to, and they want to be connected. I don't think that they're tired of buying. I think they're tired of being marketed to, if that makes sense, because we're still buying every single day. Like I'd be on these influencers page commenting shop every day, and then on the Amazon affiliate page, I'm buying all day. Y'all can get the affiliate. I'm not mad at that, but I just don't like to feel like I'm marketed to constantly.
You know, this idea you talked about of like podcasters has been percolating, and it makes me think about the reinvention. And how do you know if you're reinventing strategically versus you're reacting to pressure or trends?
Mm, that's good. I think it could be a combination of both. I think sometimes we can take too long to reinvent, and then you are hit with the pressure. And it's like, you didn't need to have to face this pressure, but you just took too long. But I do think that some people are reinventing to trends like, oh, she's a coach now, I want to be a coach now. Or people are talking about, she's launching a product about AI, so I should launch a product about AI. I think it still has to go down to, what do you do really well? How can you take, how the market is evolving and still make it applicable to what your actual skills are and what your audience needs and what your audience is looking for. So it does come down to, quote unquote, being authentic, which I know is an overused word, but it's accurate every time. Like this, it's like, you don't even use AI. Why are you now dropping a course on how to use AI? Like, make it applicable to what is actually true for you.
So what right now, and I want you to go a level deeper on this because we talked about like, you know, the different models, you know, coaching versus masterminds and et cetera. What is profitable? Like what have you seen work for entrepreneurs who are trying to figure out how to evolve? Like is it coaching? Is it, you know, high ticket events or membership models? Like what is working today?
hmm I mean, it all works today. I think I typically start my clients off with high ticket because it's instantly the most profitable. And I just think especially when you're new to building an audience online, trying to start low ticket, trying to start membership, it's like, why play yourself? You have this $100 per month membership. Let's say you even get, 30 people in there. I mean, what is $3,000 a month when you're a grown adult with a mortgage or rent? It's just not enough for the work that's required. So typically I start my clients off with high ticket. I do think that memberships work. I do think subscription model is something that's very popular. I do think consumers are starting to get annoyed by it, but it's what we're buying into. It's like, okay, now we got Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and
Yeah.
all of the things, but subscription model is what we're seeing works. You know, we see it with Patreon, we see it with OnlyFans, we see it with all of the things. Heck, I even got a DoorDash subscription. It's like, why am I paying annually to get food delivered to my house? Like, am I that greedy?
Yeah.
But we are paying for the subscriptions. So subscriptions definitely work. I think it's more profitable once you've built a community. So I think start with high ticket, build your personal brand, build a community, and then you could start selling low ticket digital products, membership, or subscription model. All of it works if you have the strategy and you have the people. With high ticket, you don't need as many people, but you do need the level of expertise and you do need to be able to deliver on that value.
A couple more. What reinvention moves have you done or seen that you would advise not to do again or wouldn't do again yourself?
Ooh, that I wouldn't advise doing. Hmm. I think the reason I wouldn't advise doing it is just based on where somebody is in their business. So, again, I tell my clients typically I would like for y'all to start off with high ticket. I'm usually yelling at my clients and saying, please sell something at least with a comma in it. Like, please, at minimum of a thousand
I like that. I
dollars.
like that.
And so my clients, I remember one of my clients a few weeks ago, she came to me and I don't know, she wanted to charge like $400 or something. And I think she paid me close to $10,000 to work with me. I'm like, why give me $10,000 to sell something for $400? It just doesn't make
Mm.
any sense. So she eventually, I think she raised her price to $1,000 and she had a launch. She had 10 people buy it. And she's like, I'm really glad that, you called me out like that. Cause one, I got the ROI. And two, I just deserve it. Like once you put in the work, you realize I really should have been charging more. So I think the reinvention move that really sets people up for the L is when they reinvent into something that's not profitable. You're just reinventing into burnout. You're doing all of this work, but you're not being fairly compensated from it. And I just find it so ironic that typically people are wanting to leave their 9 to 5 or they want to leave corporate because they feel undervalued, they feel underpaid, they feel underappreciated. And then they go build a business recreating the same thing that they were trying to escape from. You went out and you undercharged, you're now underpaid, and you're working with people who don't value you because you didn't build a brand or a standard that required people to value you. So I think reinventing into something that's not profitable is the biggest setup for an L.
And finally, how much of reinvention is strategy? Because we can talk about, okay, I did research and this thing is working for other people, I have expertise there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How much of it is strategy versus instinct and some like inner knowing? Like, I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Oh, that's a good question. Ah, it's kind of hard to say like, okay, it's 40% instinct, 60% strategy. I think it's more of a step-by-step process. It's like the first step is the instinct. And I think what a lot of us have an opportunity to do better with is trusting our gut the first time around. And I truly believe that a lot of us are struggling to trust our gut and trust our inner voice, your intuition, your Holy Spirit, whatever it is, because there's so much noise online that we're starting to now bow down to the voices of what everybody else is saying we need to be doing online. We're looking at everybody else and we don't take the time to just sit and meditate on what am I supposed to be doing next. So I don't know if I would say it's a percentage thing, but I would say the first step is knowing how to hear your own voice, hear it first, but then obey it. You hear it and then you distrust it, you go back and forth with yourself, and then you find yourself 8 months later, 9 months later, a year later in the same place because the voice that told you that you needed to be doing the thing, you decided to ignore it and then watch everybody else succeed. And then now you're sitting around like, man, I should have done that. That person stole my idea. And I'm like, why did you create space for somebody else to steal your idea? That is your fault. That is your responsibility. So the first step is truly honoring your voice, knowing how to hear it, trusting it the first time around, and following through with it, then saying, okay, now what's the strategy so I can execute what my voice told me to do?